Welcome to Pause and Effect with me, Jez Rose. Now, each episode I'm joined by a special guest, and together we'll explore how a slower and simpler life can have a profound effect on us, our work, and our sense of purpose. I'm no stranger to podcasts, but this one feels already much more personal to me. It echoes my own journey from chaotic corporate life to a much slower, simpler pace and style of life that I wasn't even aware I needed at the time. But now it just all feels so right. It's almost as though my body was yearning for this for a long time, years. But it was unsure how to get it, while all the time my brain did what they're so good at, adapted and kept on keeping on. As an author, it's a joy to have the owners of a bookstore as guests in this first series. But as I sit here, having publicly walked away from a 22-year career to pursue a still fledgling dream, and so full of uncertainty, here are two women who have done the very thing so many of us dream of. Walking away from the stress and pressures of working for someone else or corporate drudgery and doing something else on their own terms. Something that speaks to their heart. Opening a little shop, my guests today have discovered new versions of themselves, a renewed sense of happiness, and in doing so, have found joy. I am absolutely thrilled that for this first episode I'm joined by Amber and Karen from the award-winning independent bookshop Folde. I'm told people visit the picturesque town of Shaftesbury in Dorset for the scenery and stay for the bookstore. Welcome to Pause and Effect. We'll launch straight into this, if that's all right.
Of course.
Yeah, it's all good. We'll try not to talk over each other. We tend to sometimes.
Yes, by the way, I'm Amber and that's Karen.
Lovely. Right, Amber on my left, Karen on my right. It will be different for you, I'm sure, in real life.
We're like Ant and Dec. We always sit this way round for reasons I don't know.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I think if we did it the other way, it would just be weird.
Yeah, no, I like it. So welcome. I'm super excited that, as I said before, that I get to speak to you because of what I think I know is coming, and from what we have sort of mutual friends like Kathy Slack and other people that I have told me that you have to get these two ladies on your podcast. So so don't disappoint me. All right, as well.
We'll do our very best not to.
No pressure.
So in a sort of 30-second quick wrap-up, what is... Well, not wrap-up, because we've not got... Oh, but it'd be quick, wouldn't it? Hi, goodbye. What's a sort of very brief introduction to the Folde story? If you've got like a sort of a one-liner as to Folde's birth and becoming.
Well, we sometimes jokingly call it our pandemic-induced midlife crisis. So that's the one-liner.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
But there is more to it beyond that, of course.
There is more to it than that. Okay, there's more to it than that. So we are neighbours turned friends who had both reached, I think, in our professional careers, a point of, actually, let's not mince our words, burnout, which we recognised in each other. And we decided we wanted to change the way we work to something that just felt more balanced and that would root us in our community.
And more fun.
And more fun. And that is what Folde is. That is what came, that was the intention. And out of that came Folde, which is a niche nature writing bookshop and a gallery to a certain extent. We sell locally made art and craft, but it's all about a celebration of nature and place, and born out of a real love of where we live, because we are in beautiful Dorset. We're at the top of Gold Hill, which is that very famous Hovis Hill that I'm not sure if you're old enough to remember, but we are.
I do. I'm deceptively youthful.
So beautiful. So an iconic Dorset location for a place that celebrates everything that is beautiful about Dorset and the natural world generally.
Mm. Oh, lovely. I mean, this is only going to be episode 1 of this new podcast series, but if you've listened to the trailer or any of my, blah blahing on social about it, I think people will immediately see how this fits the theme of Pause and Effect, and we'll delve a little deeper into that very shortly. But you touched on there. Oh, by the way, I also love the fact that you referred to it as a midlife crisis moment during lockdown. I think pretty much everybody in the world had one of those, but it normally involves sourdough or a half-finished project.
There was some banana bread in this, but It was mostly beer fuel, to be fair.
You took it to the next level. So let's talk about this big pivot for you, this sort of leaving the corporate life. What did life look like before for both of you? You both mentioned burnout, and I'm fascinated by that. We may touch on that a little bit. We don't need to get super gory and gruesome, but I think it's super relevant to this notion of it's almost like the recognition of what life was like before, then something happens, and what life can be like in the future, and how different those two can be. Because when you're in that life, when you're in the burnout life, that's just life. That's you just, we're brilliantly resilient. We just keep going with it and we adapt and evolve. So can you talk to me a little bit for each of you about what that life looked like before? What wasn't working or felt misaligned?
Well, for me, I'd spent 24 years working for the same company. I was head of sustainability for a global tech company that worked in the aviation sector, and I loved my job. But there was a team of two of us trying to bring an organisation round to understanding what sustainability meant while holding down several other large projects. And it felt a little bit like sort of banging my head against a wall. Every piece of budget, every job was hard fought. And, we both work hard. We're both used to working hard, but everything was hard. And no matter what I did, I felt there was a great pressure to do more with less, be better, be faster, while trying to persuade people that actually operating as a sustainable business was good for us, good for our people, and also good for the planet, good financially. And it got to the point where I had a number of terrific bosses, and I had one that I didn't gel with and he didn't gel with me. And I kind of got to the point where I thought, I can't do this anymore. I was traveling extensively across the world, again, doing some great stuff. And I loved my job till the day I left, but I didn't love the way that the culture and the values of the organisation where I've started had changed so much. And I did that thing that probably quite a lot of midlife women do, thinking it's me, until I thought, actually, it's not me. And so I took myself out of that with no particular plan, but apart from to decompress. And I handed my notice in the February. And of course, we're in full pandemic by the March. And I was at that point, I thought, I don't care. I need to stop because this is not good for my health.
Good for you. Good for you.
So in a sort of parallel situation, I mean, I was director of marketing and communications for an independent school, a large independent school about 12 or 13 miles away from Shaftesbury. And it was a job I'd been doing for 13 years. And like Amber, there was much that I loved about it. I was in a senior role. It was the most beautiful setting. But it took so much out of me. It was a 24/7 boarding school environment. And even though my job wasn't 24/7 on paper, it seemed to occupy my brain 24/7. And I could it didn't really have it. Quite naturally, there wasn't a 9-to-5 culture there. And I don't believe there is in many workplaces now. But it occupied so much of my brain. And I was I don't know. I found I'm a bit of a perfectionist in some ways. And I think I was always feeling like I wasn't quite doing well enough. It's a really tough environment, actually. It's incredibly competitive. And I think there's a diminishing market of people who can afford independent school fees. But all eyes would be on the marketing department about why you couldn't supply a steady stream of children to come in year 9. And actually, the rational me knows that wasn't down to me. That was external factors and the fact there was so much competition, even though this was a wonderful school. And I think I just drove myself harder and harder, thinking that if I just pedaled faster, somehow, I could improve the situation. I realise now that a lot of that is kind of down to my personality type. And I had definitely been on this conveyor belt. I was a try-hard at school. I was head girl. I went to university, the first person in my family to do that, which I think is also significant. And had worked my way up through a career, firstly in publishing and then in marketing, pinning everything to this belief that if you just climbed the career ladder, if you did all those things right, if you pleased everyone, worked really hard, got gold stars, that would be the route to happiness. And I realised as I was, the more senior my work became, what my roles were, I realised that it wasn't making me happy. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. And I think it was like this kind of whole myth that I had bust for myself, that I realised this wasn't the secret to a happy life. And I had just reached this point. And it chimed exactly with when Amber had reached this point. We used to meet in the pub on a Friday night.
Both looking slightly glazed, I'm fine, I'm fine. And we just sort of stare into a pint going, oh.
I could see it in her face. And I didn't know Amber as well then, but I could see it, and I thought, she feels like I do.
Yes.
And we were both exhausted.
Yeah. And, the Friday night visit to the pub was sort of very much actually get to spend some time in the town, even though it's invariably dark at that point, because we weren't getting the chance to actually be part of the community in the place that we loved. Sure. Saturdays and Sundays were taken up often with chores and dull things like laundry or shopping for corporate tights, that kind of nonsense.
I had moved to Shaftesbury, back in 2007 from Southampton, because my family were from Dorset originally, but I grew up in Hampshire, and I wanted to. We moved here in search of a kind of a better work-life balance, or that kind of wholesome country living that I really wanted. And then I'd managed to get myself into a work situation where I could have just been living anywhere, because I was so tired by the weekend. And quite often, work would be in my head anyway, or there might be an issue I was dealing with that was sort of being, sort of done out of hours. And so, like Amber said, we were both kind of visitors in our own town. And so part of the aspiration, as well as a better quality of life, was about being properly rooted here. And this is the most amazing community to be a part of. And we had both spent years just not being part of it.
Just skimming the surface.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, actually.
So we basically took ourselves off, just us two, with a bottle of wine and 2 large glasses.
There's a running theme here, isn't there?
You noticed that?
Don't have an issue.
There's a little bit more of a story there as well. So there's a picture in our local pub. We've got a postcard of it here that our landlady gave us. Oops. Yeah. Which is of Shaftesbury of olden days. But it's basically a picture of a time where you had shopkeepers on the street in what looked like leather workwear pinnies, being part of the community and talking to people. And we would stare at that. It's in a little room in the ship called the Snug. And we would stare at that thinking there must be more to this. So when we went for this bottle of wine, we were trying to figure out what a different pace of life and way of life might look like. And we didn't really know then, but we knew that it had to centre around being in town, being active and part of the community, and celebrating both the things that we love and the things that keep us sane. So the things we love are reading and art, traditional arts and crafts, and keeping us sane. Reading, being in nature, noticing the seasons, all of those things that we're drawn to kind of wipe away the feeling of a corporate life, being stuck in an office with sealed windows. Or I used to travel a lot on airplanes. I just used to have sort of airplane face, that sort of slightly dry, tight skin. It was horrible. And so that's how the notion of Folde was born, but it didn't immediately come as a bookshop, did it? No,
so I was exactly as Amber said. When I was sort of in my corporate life, when I wasn't working, I would be striding out on the coast path. I'm afraid I am one of those cliched wild swimming middle-aged women. But I'd like to say I started it before everyone else, but I have been wild swimming for a long time and found it was such a good reset for me. And it was, and both those things became vitally important to my well-being. And so it did seem, as we were looking for something else to do. I knew that I wanted to do something that expressed that love of nature and place, but I didn't think it would manifest itself into a bookshop necessarily. So, but we had the idea. Everyone thinks it's a kind of, when I say it was a pandemic-induced midlife crisis,
that just sort of accelerated
it. Was the pandemic that accelerated it, because I had been, and I think this is really important actually, I had spent my whole life minimizing risk. It was that you, as I said, you did the right thing. You got your exam results and you did, you were sensible, and 1 + 1 equals, and you just do it that way. And, that's how things should work out. But so I had avoided risk, and I was terrified of stepping away from a well-paid job that had taken me a long time to sort of to climb up to, a really good pension. Okay, a really good pension. And I thought, and all I could think of was, what if it failed? What if it failed? So we'd had this idea for the shop when we realised we were both reading lots of nature writing, and we appreciated the same kind of artwork that was sort of being used on the book covers. So everything aesthetically hung together really well. But then the pandemic, that was the biggest curveball any of us could have imagined. And it just made me realise that if something like this can come from nowhere, you can't control life. You can't control the unforeseen. Life is inherently risky and surprising. And So what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? And I think it was that Amber had already, as she said, had already handed her notice in. And I think then we started to really sort of focus and drill down on what this concept might, or how it might sort of translate into a real life shop. And I just thought, life's unpredictable. Just do it.
Yes. And I was kind of on the other side of the chasm going, I've jumped. It's okay. The sky's still where it ought to be.
Yeah.
The ground's quite nice. It's okay over here. So it's like, felt like sort of extending the hand out going, come on, we can do this.
Yeah, I suspect that really helped, didn't it? So I'm interested to know what success looked like prior to Fold, to see whether there's a difference, like in how you measure or quantify being successful in life, and whether you even have value of that. So we'll start in the order that we go in. There seems to be a theme, like a rhythm we're in here. So if you think back to your career, Amber, what did success look like for you then?
I think for me, so I didn't go to university straight from school. It wasn't really an option nobody in my family had. I went straight into work. So I've always been, you muscle down, you do the things, you try and make yourself better, because that's the way my family works. And so for me, there was a degree of getting to be a manager or a senior manager or a director. It was kind of role collecting, if you like. And then once I got to that role, I thought, well, I'm not sure I want to do more and more of this. But I've always been very driven by purpose. So I was brought up in West Dorset. I was brought up learning the language of the countryside. We were taught everything from orienteering to kind of farming at school. And for me, I had the corporate piece, which was, be shinier, be sleeker, be on an airplane. When I thought, that's not enough. What I really loved doing was the things that made an impact. So, for example, I worked on some charitable work, setting up some IT and education programs in East and South Africa, but working with people on the ground. So it wasn't just giving out shiny laptops to places that don't have the energy to do it. And I found that much more fulfilling. And so that kind of purpose-driven piece for me was more important, whereas the professional side, it was about targets and KPIs and reviews and performance curves. And that stuff kind of left me cold after a while. So for me now, that kind of purpose-led piece for both of us is very much a big chunk at the heart of what Fold is, and also, importantly, what it isn't.
Yeah, sure. I think that's really important to differentiate that. Does that sort of echo your own feelings of success, Karen, even though you came from it from a sort of different perspective?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting. I don't suppose, even though I had achieved, quite a lot in terms of promotions and sort of general, climbing the career ladder and moving, I'd always kind of moved along to jobs that I thought looked interesting, rather than thinking, I want to be working at that level. And often I sort of got promoted within the role because it turned out there was some stuff I was quite good at. But
it's lots of things you're good at.
But I think that's actually, joking about that, I never felt that good at anything. And so I thought, on paper, I'm successful. I've got this job. It's got a very grand title, And look at me on the senior team, and I'm click-clacking around in my high heels and my, smart dresses and painful sort of tights that we no longer have to wear anymore.
We have no tights.
Sorry, tights are symbolic for us.
We've got a woolly tight to wear under a bookseller frock.
It's just like, but this whole thing.
I know, like a 15 denier nylon, there is no place for that in our lives.
No. And so, there's a kind of sense that I look the part. I mean, I look much more feral now. I used to have a very sharp bob, and I had a kind of...
You could cut paper on it.
I used to have a really sharp haircut. There was a certain image that I had because I thought I was sort of trying to represent success. And the odd thing is that even though on paper I knew that other people might say, well, she's done well, I didn't feel successful because the stuff that really fulfilled me was everything I was doing around the edges, like when I wasn't working. And as I mean that, really discovering this strong sense of connection with nature and the outdoor world. And but I thought, because my job was really hard, and like Amber said, everything was driven by numbers that were harder and harder to achieve. So I was thinking, everybody else is successful. Look how good they are. And I think, there does come a point, also this is relevant too, that being a woman of a certain age, a lot of women go through a point in midlife where they experience crashing self-doubt. And that came to me probably when I was at my most senior, my senior role. And I just suddenly thought, I don't know that I'm any good at this. So I never actually I knew theoretically what success was meant to look like, but I don't ever think at any point I thought, I'm successful. I just didn't feel that way. And I don't know how that should have, or should I have felt that? I don't know. It never. I feel much more successful now. Absolutely.
Hello, it's me, Jez, and I'm interrupting quickly to let you know about my short, free weekly email I send out. It's short, it's free, and it's sent every week by email, which is why it's called a short, free weekly email. It's read by 29,000 people all over the world, and if you're not one of those 29,000 people all over the world, it could be about to be read by 29,001. It's got 3 short notes from me, 1 thought, 1 question, 1 quote, and some content for the curious. So head over to thatjezrose.com to sign up, and hey, if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. After all, it's free. Now, back to pause and effect. You mentioned risk, and that innately, inherently, you're sort of more risk averse, and then certainly professionally, that's what you built up to do. I'm super interested to know what your friends and family said or thought when you told them that you were going to open a bookshop, when I think most people's impression is that books are dead, everyone's doing stuff online. I hear this all the time, and I have to sort of re-educate people that isn't quite the case. But what was the sort of impression that you got from those closest to you when you told them?
They were quite different, weren't they? I mean, our other halves, I have to say, have been unfailingly supportive, if not raised eyebrows, at times, going, well, what do you do? And we use them as a good stress test. My folks, they've always worked, they're still working, they're in their mid-70s now. They just said, oh, good-o, sure, it'll be marvellous. And that was it, because that's the way that my family rolls. But your mum was a little bit more worried, wasn't she?
Well, I think, yes. I mean, but only briefly. They surprised me. My parents are very traditional, and they had, and again, probably I'd learned a lot of that sort of, they started out with very little in life. And actually, I think this is relevant too. They worked, they were married very young. They had my brother at a very young age. They grew up, he grew up the first few years in a bedsit. Then my dad went back to university, to night school, worked hard, got a really good job, got a good pension, managed to retire early. So I had probably learned a lot of what I thought you're supposed to do through them. And but it surprised me when I first mentioned it to them. They were I don't think they'd realised how unhappy I was. But as soon as my mum in particular had clocked that, and she really understood that I was fairly miserable, she was 100%. They were both 100% behind us. And how can we help? And only this week she said, I'm so proud of you and what you've done. I sense you're a different person. And as Amber said, our respective other halves. I mean, mine, once we'd worked out the maths, because I really had to work out how I was going to be able to afford to do this. And I did I drew up a huge, Amber will tell you, she's the one who likes spreadsheets.
I love a spreadsheet.
I do not.
Give me a pivot table and I'm in heaven.
I hate spreadsheets, okay? But even I got there and I looked at all my bank transactions and my credit card spend, and I itemised it line by line, and I worked out how much of my salary I was spending on being tired and stressed and haircuts.
And corporate
outfits.
It's ridiculous. You spend all this nonsense on form-fitting clothes.
Because you're supposed to look a certain way. Yeah. And I really worked out I was spending money on takeaway. No, we didn't live off takeaways as such. Oh, let's go out for food. I'm going to buy that because I need a treat. And I'm so, and there was a huge chunk of my money that was going on, filling in the gaps where I wasn't happy, and also where I felt like I'd earned it because I would look how hard I've been working. So, I think, going back to sort of reaction of our loved ones. So when my partner and I sat down and looked at this together, and he said, and all he wanted was for me to be back in the room. Actually, this always makes me a bit emotional when I talk about it, because I wasn't.
Well, he felt he'd lost you for a bit,
and we've been together since the beginning of time, and he felt he had lost me. And he said, seeing you come home and you don't, you're just done in. And I've got a few photos of me. Like, I used to come in and scoop up the cat for a cuddle. And there's one in particular he's got me, and I look every inch the successful career woman with my sharp hair and my smart dress, and I'm cuddling the cat, and my face, and it really upsets me, because I just hadn't realised how bad it had got. And so when he realised that, I think, we thought we could make it work, and here was the plan. And this is, also going into business with a woman like Amber is hugely reassuring for anyone. And I would recommend getting an Amber for anyone who is thinking of doing this. So I wasn't striking out on my own, and this was a very well considered plan that we had. And then he was like, go for it. And he and Amber's husband, Kev, are just our number one champions. So actually the reaction wasn't quite what I expected. It was mostly pretty supportive. There were one or two people, and this made me wobble, colleagues who said, or former colleagues who said, "Ooh, that's awfully brave." And I thought, that's a loaded word. And then you can feel yourself wobbling slightly, going, "Oh, is it?" But no, I don't know. And so there was a bit of that. I think a few people who thought, "What on earth?" But they weren't my close friends or loved ones.
Bravery is subjective as well, as are comfort zones. Yeah.
But what was interesting as well, certainly when I left, there was a colleague who left the same time as me, again, with nothing particular to go to because she'd had enough. And we had our leaving call over Zoom. It was all very modern. Oh, wow. But we actually, between us, started a little bit of an exodus. Other people kind of saying, actually, if these people who've been here for this period of time are making a change, we could maybe do that. And undoubtedly some of that was driven by pandemic and what have we got to lose making that shift. But we have found sort of amongst our previous colleagues, people who come into the shop who are looking to make a change, there's lots of people saying, "You've done it. What was it like? Is it really scary?" Like, yeah, it's scary, but you know what? It's okay. You land and you learn. Sure. You know, you literally land and roll with it.
Also, the bit that surprised me the most is that feeling of free fall is an incredible feeling. Once you step off and you go, "Woohoo, we're doing this."
You barely even look back to say cheerio.
I really didn't. I laughed. I shouldn't say this because this is going to be broadcast, but I actually laughed as I was driving away from, and I said I'm going to put caveat. I did love, there were many elements of my job that I loved, and there were some superb people there, and I'm in touch with many of them still. But when I was driving away, I laughed, and that surprised me.
It's giddy, isn't it?
It came out of nowhere. I just
lovely. Was the
my way down
freedom,
the drive,
right? Yeah, but that brings me to my next question, because I want to ask this. What I wanted to know what the sort of early days looked like, because I think that there is a romanticism about anybody who sets up their own business or their own brand. I remember in the early days of the farm what it was like. I remember I used to have a shop. I remember what that was like. What surprised you the most? And did you ever think, what have we done? How did you navigate through that? You're very fortunate because I can see you work brilliantly together, and I'm sensing that there are, where one has less strengths, the other one fills in those gaps, and you kind of, support each other and work brilliantly together. But I'd love to know a what have we done moment and any surprises, I suppose. Talk to me about how that all panned out.
I can,
there's so many. I think one thing that was really helpful that we did, so during that kind of early lockdown, you could take a walk with somebody else. And so we did that, and we talked a lot about what we thought it might be, and equally what we knew we didn't want it to be. And that kind of made sure that our values were aligned. And I think that was really, really important. And we also went through kind of the process of working out a partnership agreement, which would look at things like conflict. And that was an interesting thing to do because it's quite an intimate and personal thing when you're kind of combining business relationships with friendships. And it was a delightful thing that actually we were very, very much aligned. Although we did spend 4 years arguing about tea towels, but that's a whole other story.
Still do.
So I think that was a really positive thing. And sort of early days, there was so much that we learned. We have a saying where we look back, we made a thing, and we giggle at it. And I think after our first year, after our second year, after our third, and we still pinch ourselves when we look back at how far we've come, because we had a list of what we wanted to do, didn't we? And it was quite modest.
But I think what's interesting is when we opened on the day that non-essential shops could reopen after the last lockdown. So there were people, I mean, we had told our story on Instagram, and we had a reasonable following by the time we opened. And there were people who were just clamoring to come in and see what it was all about and spend their money in a real life actual shop. So our first day, we did so well. And I remember thinking, well, this is easy. Because bear in mind, we didn't have any retail experience at all. We had many other things to bring to the party, but no retail experience. I thought, wow, this is adorable. We're going to retire in a year. And because that wasn't really a true indication of how it would be, and so actually after a little while, things settled down. And then, but we sort of then, we kind of motored through to Christmas. Christmas is a great time to be in a shop, so we had a pretty good first Christmas. And then you get to a cold Tuesday in February. when no one's got any money. Shaftesbury has all the weather. It's one of the highest towns in England and is fond of horizontal wind, rain and fog in the winter and sometimes in the summer. And I remember there was a day, the first day, where we really took very little. And I remember thinking, oh goodness.
Have they bought all the books?
Maybe it's over. Maybe everyone has now bought all the things they want from our shop and that is it. Oh dear. And it was a real feeling of what have we done? Actually, maybe this is totally unsustainable. We'd ridden that wave after the pandemic and maybe this is it. What it was is we haven't been through a year's cycle in a shop. And now we understand that in January and February, you're not likely to sell that much. People are, they're still recovering from Christmas. They don't need stuff. It's kind of, and Shaftesbury's a town that attracts lots of tourists and they're not generally here in those sort of drizzly winter months. So now we have that experience that you can step back and look at the whole year picture. I do not worry if we have a quiet day in winter. Okay, it's fine. But the first time you go through that and you don't know retail, I really did think, and also I think because it does take longer to grow than I think I'd possibly realised. So being patient, and it has not been an overnight thing at all, at all, And so there've been moments when I think just from the reality check, of sort of the finances and that, you don't just instantly create a shop and then suddenly, you're earning what you were earning before. It doesn't work that way. You have to work at it. But I don't know if there've been any other moments that we thought, no, I mean, that's it for me. That was it. Yeah. That first quiet day. But I got over that quite quickly. I think you just have to sort of steel yourself a bit and go, no, it'll be okay. It'll be okay.
Well, what about pace though? So how would you describe the pace of life now compared to your old careers?
It can vary day by day. So there's no typical day as a bookseller. That's one thing we've discovered. We knew very early on we weren't going to open until 10. Before we even had a shop, we knew we're not going to open until 10 because there's no point. And also, we're not very good at getting up to open a shop at 9. So that was kind of an early part. We find, we can look at the figures and see that there are sort of high points during a day. But you might have a day where you come up to town and there's somebody waiting at the door to buy an emergency present for a wedding, which they'll ask you to wrap. And then you've got a steady stream of people all day. Some people might be chatting. Some people might be coming in asking for advice. Somebody might be coming in and buy, £100 worth of books. It's very, very varied. And then you might have a week like we did, earlier in the summer, where we had a slight incident with some pipe work and we had the Duke of Westminster came in to buy a book with his equerry. And it's very, very odd. But that kind of rhythm of the shop, it gently sort of burbles like a stream. There might be kind of little rushes, but it's good. In the run up to Christmas, we know that's always busy and we're ready for that. But there's always a gentle life running through the shop, whether it's people who are chatting or visiting. And we will often have the shop still open. We say we close at 5-ish, but if we've got things to do, we'll have it open of an evening. And people meander in. There's always stuff to do, but it doesn't feel... We are masters of our own time. And if we don't get a newsletter out at 4 p.m. on a Thursday, that's okay because it's our shop. We can adjust that. And that's been really important for us, I think, hasn't it?
It doesn't, we are busy. It's and I tell you what, the old cliche about spinning plates is true because when you have a small business, we're not just behind the counter or going through the book catalogues deciding what to order. We're marketing the business. Amber's usually crunching a spreadsheet somewhere, paying suppliers. We're sort of forward planning, organising our events program. And we have a small team as well. Everyone is part-time, but we have a small team behind us. But there are many, many aspects to it. So sometimes when your brain is still quite full, because you think, there's that, and there's that, and there's that, and there's that, you'd think, actually, do I have more spare time than before?
Sure.
Arguably not. But as Amber says, we're masters of our own destiny. So if we decide that actually we might want to, it's quiet afternoon, the sun's shining, we're going to close early and go for a swim, we'll do that. We don't open till 10. This morning we went off and had coffee together because Kev was behind the counter. And I was thinking, technically this is work, but it doesn't feel like work. And the key thing as well, I heard this from somebody else, that the holy grail to work-life balance is finding the thing you love. This genuinely never feels like work, no matter how busy we are and how much there is going on. It's a joy. It isn't like, I have not felt that sense of pressure bearing down on me ever since we started to do this. So although we can have a very full day, it's interesting because I was thinking about the theme of your podcast, and is life slower? Yes, it is, actually. It is. But is it any less busy? And I mean, it sounds a bit like a sort of, kind of like I'm contradicting myself there, but it's different. It's different when it's yours, because we decide
we
how
can
much,
control the pace to a degree.
We don't have to have an events program every spring and autumn, which is how we tend to run them. We don't have to say yes to opportunities that we're offered to do. We could pare it back and keep it really simple if we wanted, and really make it just about what's happening here and now in the shop. But we're kind of not like that. This has been such an exciting ride, and it's opened so many doors for us that old part of you that kind of still wants to grab opportunities. I mean, that hasn't gone, but we've got better at judging which ones we should grab. So we tried a few things that were like, we think, why do we do that? Books are heavy. We get offered to do like pop-ups in places and events and festivals. And we've worked out now that we don't really want to lug a quarter of a ton of books up the cobbles into a van unless it's really worth it. So we have the confidence to say no now. And that in itself helps to control the pace a bit, I would say.
I think also slow. Sorry, go on now.
I was going to say, just on that, we learned to say no to things a little bit more when we realised there's kind of a shift in that our success meant that more people wanted us as part of their event because of what we were bringing, rather than us needing to be part of somebody else's event to raise our own profile. And while it's a subtle shift, that's actually been really important for us in terms of setting that pace or that decision.
Yeah, well, and also that has parallels to your corporate life as well, doesn't it? Because of course, both of whatever your roles were, have been replaced. And ultimately we are all replaceable in the corporate network, but this is something unique for you. I was going to just mention that, of course, the idea of living a slower life isn't necessarily just about doing nothing or even just about physical pace and time. Sometimes it is about the ability to be more present in something. And so it doesn't constantly feel like you're being rushed or that you're up against it all the time. And what a joyful, I love the fact that you took time off for a coffee. I think that's gorgeous. Do you think that it's changed how you think about time and success and the idea of what is enough? I mean, you sort of alluded to this, Karen, in so much as the very classic and very, very common consumption in order to fill voids, which I can entirely relate to, and I can see you giggling as you drive away from handing in your notice, because I'd imagine your nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system, must have that valve must have been released, and your body must have said, "Oh, I'm free." But has that? Do you think it's changed that, or?
Yeah, definitely. It's I don't know. So for I said I'm going back to my spreadsheet that I pulled together. The first sort of couple of years, I would say, I had a massive sort of belt tightening exercise going on. And it also helped that in that, I had already worked out that the things that I loved were the things that cost nothing. Okay, so it's getting out there, and as long as, and even now, the thing that my partner and I say is that the thing that we hold dear and want to hold on to is the ability to just to be out there walking. And we're trying to do the South West Coast Path, been chipping away at it for years, got just over halfway, more to do. There is nothing we love better. And that's kind of what I now feel is, I buy less stuff for a long way. I mean, it's actually taken me quite a long time to buy some of the things that we sell. We have some really lovely lampshades. I only got one of those this year, like 4.5 years in. I stop and think before I buy. I think, but that's also in tune with how we run the business. So we are a certified B Corp, which is something we are incredibly proud of. And even though Amber's background is in sustainability, it still took, 9 months to...
Yeah, it's hard work, and it takes money and effort and commitment and legal changes to your business, but that kind of has that sense of purpose. And we have our own values as well. And one of those is being joyful and being kind. And those are really important for us. And sustainability for us is about having financial sustainability so that we can continue to work with the makers locally and continue to support our employees locally and continue to pay ourselves. That's an important element as well.
But it's not, I think, It's an interesting one because I think I feel like I need less out of it in terms of material things. We always say it needs to wash its face. That's it. It needs to wash its face so that we can sort of draw enough to live on and pay our team. But as it's evolved, like Amber mentioned this at the start, purpose has become, this has been a real surprise actually, because we often say we built our own life raft. We needed this. And now it's become that for other people in all sorts of ways.
Yes.
It really has. And I did a little Instagram post, a reel the other day, telling our story again, which I hadn't done on there for a long time. And we were utterly overwhelmed by the responses to that.
Wow.
And how people told us what the shop meant to them. And we had DMs about it and people telling us in the shop. And one follower who said, I don't think you realise what your shop means to all of us and what you've created. I mean, it's, and that's quite overwhelming when people tell you that, because we did it. Because we did it selfishly. We did it for us because we needed it. And now other people get it too and they've come on board. But also we are political in what we do. So you can't, to my mind, you can't be doing anything that concerns the natural world and not speak up about water
Standing
pollution,
up for nature,
biodiversity loss. You have to be a champion for nature. So I think sometimes we have a bit more power because it's unexpected that, well, I don't know, we've got a lot of grannies being arrested at the moment, haven't we? But, we're two sort of slightly kind of, I don't know.
I mean, basically, if you said, two middle-aged corporate women have opened a shop, you'd probably think it was a couple of frou-frou ladies with a hobby.
Yeah.
It could not be further from the truth. We have thoughts, we have opinions, we have robust conversations.
Yeah.
We funded our business ourselves. It's not a hobby project. It's something that gives us an opportunity, and it's a privilege to do so, to inform and to influence at all kinds of levels.
And we've realised it can do that. It can. And you putting the right book into someone's hands after you've had a conversation about something important feels, we realise that you sort of think, I sort of dismissed ourselves in a way at the start, thinking, well, are we just the shop that sells the pretty things and a few books? But actually, as it's evolved, we've realised that people are listening when we speak and that you can have a really good, and those little ripples that come out of it are quite powerful.
What have books taught you about life since opening Folde?
Gosh, I think books are still a joy and a privilege to be able to, as Karen says, put into somebody's hands, and books are meaningful. So a couple of years ago, we started our nature fiction section, and it's got some modern nature fiction. So it might relate. So the term generally relates either to stories around climate or place, but we had a copy of Watership Down in there, and we would have people come in going, oh my God, Watership Down. I remember reading that as a child. And so they have a very visceral effect on quite a lot of people and readers. And there are people who, when we did that section, we said, tell us what your best loved nature fiction prize books are. And so we kind of crowdsourced that. So we recognise that books have such an importance still in people's lives, regardless of kind of like streaming or electronic book readers or any of that. They're linked to place, they're linked to relatives, family, childhood. They're linked to being able to turn off from everything else that's going on out there. And they're still ultimately a source of knowledge. And I think something that gives us great hope is we have a lot of people maybe in their 20s, early 30s coming in who say, I need to know more about nature and the environment. Where do I start? And we're like rolling up the sleeves going, right, let's get you fixed. And I think that's been really encouraging for us. And that sense of importance of books hasn't diminished. I think if you're an independent bookshop, and independent book selling is the most amazing and generous sector in terms of knowledge, every bookseller is a brilliant guide to the books on their shelves, whether it's a specialist bookshop or a generalist, and they are absolute portals to knowledge and understanding and awe.
And they can sometimes radically change the way you think about things that you've taken for granted before. So I think we were asked once which book sort of symbolises our shop. And fun enough, it was a bit like a Mr. and Mrs. question or Mrs. and Mrs. question, because we were both asked separately by the same person and we both said the same thing.
Yeah.
And that book is the Book of Trespass, which is about right to roam and access to nature.
Yes.
And that's a book that I couldn't, once I'd read it, it totally changed my way of thinking. And it made me realise that I'd been sleepwalking and not about this whole issue and, not even questioning why most of the land is off limits to most of us. And since then, so something like that. Now, it is a deliberately subversive book, and there are a lot of people who don't agree with it, but it unlocked something in me. And now that whole Right to Rim campaign has become an important part of, we support it and we talk about it all the time.
And we talk with them, and
we know
many of the people involved.
Lots of nature writers are involved in it. And I've been to rallies with them, and it is important. And it's just, so, that's one book. Now, there are lots of books on the subject, but that one book changed something in me. And I think that is the power of good writing and a good book, and you read it at the right time when you're receptive to it. So, clearly you've got to also be able to make a judgment yourself about whether you agree with it. But I just think that is such a good symbol of how powerful good writing can be, and to be able to pass those on to people who might also, be able to absorb that and respond in that way it's a great privilege.
How do you think places like bookshops help us to slow down? I mean, you've spoken a bit about the community that you've built there and your local community being wonderfully supportive of it. And you've mentioned events and different interactions with customers and different people that come in. Do you think, and bookstores are, I suppose, certainly that you would have a much better finger on the pulse than I would about this, but certainly I think the perception is that they're under threat a bit. You see a lot of the big players closing them down, and we see the perception is there's a rise in Kindle, although interestingly I hear that sort of up and down, and the trend is that books are on the up in terms of physical books being bought. But do you think bookshops, libraries, do you remember libraries? That's sad, isn't it? So how is it that bookshops help us slow and help us fundamentally change us as well, right? As you just mentioned, Karen.
I think there's a phrase that the book selling community use, and it came from a study that was done about 3 or 4 years ago, that bookshops are placemakers for towns or villages or communities or cities. And so it's a place where legitimately you can come in and you don't have to rush around to buy something. You can legitimately spend your time and linger. And we found when we first opened, it was just after COVID. And so people coming in for sometimes the saddest of reasons, and they came into a bookshop because it felt a safe space. And we're very big on it being inclusive and safe for anybody to have a conversation or to not have a conversation. And I think that's a key part of the unique purpose of bookshops. Obviously buying books is important as well. Now, bookshops have been growing over the past 6 or 7 years. It's kind of plateaued a little bit, but I think there's about 1,000 independent bookshops in the UK at the moment.
Oh.
There is competition from the high street, and we do have stories of booksellers saying, well, you should sell your books at half price to compete with Amazon. We're not competing with Amazon because booksellers have individual, unique knowledge. And while we're niche in our genre, there are several amazing bookshops who are, unique in their own and experts in what they have. And that's what you have, is that experience. So I think if you wander into a town and you think, right, I'm going to go into a bookshop, you find something lovely, you have a glorious conversation, you might have other customers joining in, you might discover a great place for coffee as a result of that, or have a conversation with somebody about a good walk. It happens in ours a lot, doesn't it? So you find out about the place that you're in or the place that you're visiting, and that encourages you just to kind of slow down and take note a bit, I think.
It rarely feels like a simple sort of quick transaction. Maybe because we can't stop talking. I do think we like to judge when somebody doesn't want to talk. I think I talk quite a lot.
She does. She does talk. I get over people sometimes and go and retreat to my pivot tables.
I really like people. People are interesting.
I like them too,
I really like people, and I love chatting. But I think it's not, you think you can usually tell if somebody simply wants to buy their book and leave. But there's always a way that I think when we take a transaction, where you might just open a door of a conversation. And as Amber said, that person may already have spent 20 minutes browsing and selecting their book or books. Yeah. So, and you'll probably talk about the book that they're buying. And then, it might inspire a conversation about something related. So they are, by their very nature, they're not a place generally that you whiz in and out of. They're a place that people linger. So they do slow down. And I think what I love about having a bookshop in a community like Shaftesbury is that people will just pop their head in. They might not be buying something that day, but they're just coming to say hi. And we are a little bit of a hub as well. So there's a sort of a social kind of I guess it's a bit of a focal point for the town. And we're very conscious. In fact, I was talking before we came on this call, I was talking to a customer about how bookshops help to combat social isolation, which can be a big issue in rural communities.
Sure.
And so we have some customers that we know probably haven't spoken to anyone else all day. And we'll make a point of taking time to find out how they are. And remember, I sort of pride myself that I can't always remember names, but I will remember something about that person. And if you just say, oh, how was such and such? Or did you enjoy, whatever it was they were reading last time? And it's a bit of a clever party trick because it makes people feel seen. I don't do it as a trick, but it's, if you can, remember something about someone and it makes them feel seen and remembered and involved. And belonging is this word I come back to all the time. We all need to belong to something and to be recognised for who we are. And the contribution that we make. And this is actually, I have to say, this is something, this talking about belonging, this was something that the head that I worked for at my previous school, for the majority of the time that I was there, she used to talk about the importance of belonging. And I don't think it entirely resonated with me until we set up this business. And so for us, in terms of belonging to our local community, and we feel like we really do now because we're here and present in it. But people, we have a community too. We have our Folde friends, and they are people that we talk to online and people who come in through the door, and we recognise them. And I think that is all part of, slowing down. That I sort of count that as part of it. It's sort of taking that time to pay, take an interest in the people who are coming into your space.
I'm almost speechless. This has been one of the most interesting interviews I think I've possibly ever done in my career. It's come at a great time for me personally, but it's just it is lovely to meet two people. I mean, you ladies have done it. You've had the dream. You've said enough's enough. You've both, interestingly and very coincidentally in many ways, got to that threshold at the same sort of time and recognised it in yourself. So I can't believe I'm going to ask this question because I'm so excited. What advice would you give to someone dreaming of starting something of their own?
I know what you'll say.
Do a spreadsheet. From the practical side, work out what you need to do. If you are going into bookselling, talk to other booksellers. And we've spoken, we've had a number of booksellers come to us saying, we want to do it. Can you talk to us? Like, yeah, of course. Let's tell you everything we know. So if there's a particular thing you want to go and talk to the other people who've done it, because generally they are generous with their advice. Work out what you need and work out what you need to take and what you need to spend each month, and then jump in. The exhilaration is extraordinary, and find a good friend to do it with.
Yeah, if you can find somebody who shares your vision, that's even better because it's an awful lot easier with two. You've got somebody who is, I always think we're each other's cheerleaders. You picked up on it, that we kind of sort of complement each other, and that, I am definitely not the spreadsheet queen, but she is. Whereas I'm the one who will be chatting at the counter, which also matters, Yep. So I think finding someone, if you're lucky enough to find someone who shares that vision, then that really helps, and it gives you confidence too, because you're not alone. But I would say to anyone who's afraid of taking risks, now somebody said this to me actually when I confided. This was actually a former colleague, and I confided in her that I had a business idea that I was cooking up with my friend and neighbour, and I was terrified of just going for it. And you know what she said to me? She said, what's the worst that could happen? And it's so obvious to ask yourself this question, but I was almost afraid of even going there. So she said, what's the worst that could happen? It could be a crashing disaster. No one gets your idea. You don't sell anything. She said, you're not going to sit there getting into more and more debt. You're going to say, okay, I tried. And then you'll go and get a job. And I was just like, that is what I would say to anyone, because it might not work, but at least you will have tried it and you'll have had fun trying it. Yeah.
So this episode is called Chapter 1, Leaving Corporate Life to Start a Bookshop. If your lives now had a chapter title, what would it be?
We need more shelf space.
That's actually true.
That is actually very, very true. So one of the joys of taking on a small shop is, that your sort of degree of risk is lower, but then when you realise, actually, when you've unpacked a big delivery of books and you're wandering around with a book because you're waiting for somebody to buy a book so you can put a book in the space so I think When we first started out, we had a list of things we would like. We wanted to be in country living. We wanted to
hold events. Yeah, meet some of our favourite authors.
We kind of did quite a lot of that quite quickly. The Guardian featured us for International Women's Day a couple of years ago. We had a 6-page spread written by a brilliant journalist in Country Homes and Interiors. We feel like we pop up everywhere because also we're proud of what we do and we want to talk about it. We've judged book awards and we're not afraid to say, actually, we can do this. And so we just go and do it.
You know what I would call it? I just thought we made a thing.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes. Chapter X, we made a thing. I love that. Yeah. So listen, as we come to the end of this, because I don't want to keep you all day, you've got books to sell and hopefully it will be a lead up to a wonderful weekend. I thought I would ask if you had maybe a favourite literary quote about life or books or change, and I personally hate it when people put me on the spot for quotes because invariably you can't think of the one. There's one you carry around all the time with you, but there's when you put on the spot you can't think of it. But just in case, is there a favourite sort of quote or maybe maybe even a book title that sort of stands out about life or books generally or change?
Oh, gosh. I mean, the one that springs to mind is feel the fear and do it anyway.
I was going to say that. I said I was thinking it's so obvious.
Yeah.
But that is the one, actually.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's also, I mean, it is really obvious, but it is, it's really okay to feel afraid, but don't let it hold you back.
If you're not feeling afraid, you're not doing your numbers properly. There should always be a degree of, if you think, I'm going to build the thing and all the people come and buy the thing and it will be forever wonderful. No. Yeah. Because then where would be the fun in that?
Oh, Amber, Karen, this has been a joy. It has been a joy. I will reiterate this, but if you're listening to this, you must support your local bookshop, but you must also visit Folde. Because it sounds like the place to visit. Wouldn't surprise me if at some point very soon you're on TripAdvisor as one of the top 10 things to do in England or something. But
are we not already?
Might have to go and do that.
Write our own review.
You've been in every other magazine. What's left?
Well, no.
And I suppose the closing thought for me is to reflect on your own chapter 1 and what that could be, because you can begin writing it today. Thank you, ladies. This has been joyful, really lovely.
Oh, it's been an absolute joy.
Yeah, thank you for having us. A pleasure talking to you.
That was utterly wonderful to chat to Karen and Amber. I wanted to create a podcast which explored the life-changing effect pressing pause on our lives can have. And I think their story does just that. So you can follow them on Instagram at Folde Dorset. Folde has an E on the end. And of course, if you're in Dorset, pop in. Let them know you heard about them here. Do please subscribe and review the podcast. It's so important for this new podcast to have you interact with it. So if nothing else, please hit the subscribe button and the 5-star review. In the next episode, I'll be speaking to someone who is something of a hero to me, producing mesmerising, beautiful and technically fascinating pieces. Join me in conversation with the ceramic artist Steve Harrison. Now, if you enjoyed today and you're not signed up already, head over to thatjezrose.com/journey to join the journey for less than 60 pence per week. It's where all of my content now is, with a focus on curated content for helping you to live in your element and find joy, passion, and purpose. I'll see you there or here again soon.